Alrighty then. Hello, welcome back. Hopefully, you're still with me. We're nearing the end of this. So, today we are going to dive into a very rich and transformative era in American literature. This is roughly from the 1980s to the 2000s, early 2000s. This is a period we can refer to as contemporary literature. For lack of a better phrase, this is still quite recent. Again, if any of you were even alive during this time. So, for the purposes of this course, we will just call it contemporary literature. So, what defines this era? In many ways, it marks a sort of turning point. Postmodernism, which this still roughly is, but we're going to view it as an offshoot or the next advancement of. But postmodernism, with its skepticism and irony, began to sort of fade, and in its place, we see a powerful surge of multiculturalism, mainly, the rise of trauma literature, and a return to realism. Very important. We're sort of going back to the beginning of this course. Though this realism is often filtered through, irony, fragmentation, still kind of holding the lens of, modernism irony or fragmentation in postmodernism. Writers in this era start to grapple more directly with identity, memory, and history, and culturally, this era is shaped by the late Cold War, post Vietnam disillusionment, the dawn of the information age, which we're all quite aware of, and the growing influence of globalization. These pressures give rise to themes like marginalization, post colonial identity, mental illness, and family fracture. Importantly, literature during this time shifts from the search for a single great American novel to something a bit broader, a chorus of diverse and intersecting narratives featuring Latinx, African American, Asian American, Indigenous, and women's voices that all had long been sidelined to the literary mainstream. So it was more bringing the voices from the back that were present but not as present as they should have been, putting them to the forefront and having less of a singular identity. Again, we might still be too close to this time period to tell, but as of right now, it's more of a individualistic identity instead of a collective one, if that makes sense. All right. Let's just dive right in with a towering figure, Toni Morrison, one of my favorite authors, and we even share a birthday. I'm very happy with that fact. Born in 1931 in Ohio, Morrison was not only a novelist, but also a senior editor at Random House, where she championed the work of Black writers. She won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1933, and she became the first African American woman to receive a Nobel Prize. Amazing. Her 1987 novel Beloved is based on the real story of Margaret Garner. She was an enslaved woman who escaped to freedom only to face unimaginable tragedy. Beloved is set during the Reconstruction, but it isn't a conventional historical novel. It's a ghost story, yes, but the quote unquote ghost is trauma. It's a mediation on memory, particularly repressed memory, and how the legacy of slavery lives on in the bodies and the psyches of Black Americans. Very, very important. Themes of motherhood, survival, and the enduring impact of systematic violence run deep in this novel. Morrison's prose is lyrical and nonlinear. Time sort of bends and loops around, and memory becomes a haunting force. Beloved changed the landscape of American literature by centering the psychological consequences of slavery and doing so through a Black female voice. moving on. Next, we shift to oh my goodness. Next, we shift to another vital voice. Excuse me. Sandra Cisneros. Born in 1954 in a Chicago Mexican-American family, Sandra grew up in a working-class neighborhood, and the experiences that shaped her writing gave rise to The House on Mango Street. Published in 1984, this novel is actually a series of vignettes told from the perspective of Esperanza Cordero, a young Latina girl navigating her identity in a poor urban neighborhood. The book, you're going to see, almost reads like poetry. It's very compact, very lyrical, and very emotionally vivid. Cisneros explores themes like gender expectations, cultural identity, poverty, and female empowerment. Esperanza's journey is one of claiming voice and space, which is a feminist awakening intertwined within her ethnic identity. Very, very powerful stuff. Though short and accessible, The House on Mango Street is very profound. I agree. It became a staple in classrooms across the country, like this one, and opened the door for greater inclusion of Latinx literature in the American canon. Okay, now we go to Tim O'Brien. Wonder if any of you guys have read this before. It's quite a popular book with a lot of my friends, I find. But now we're going to dive back into war, memory, and the blurry line between fact and fiction. This is Tim O'Brien's The Things They Carried. O'Brien was born in 1946 in Minnesota and served in the Vietnam War. His writing, especially this 1990 collection of interlinked short stories, grapples with the emotional and moral weight of that experience. The stories explore what soldiers quote unquote carry. This is both physically and emotionally. But beyond that, O'Brien questions what it means to tell a quote unquote true war story. He introduces concepts like quote unquote happening truth versus quote unquote story truth, reminding us that emotional truth often surpasses factual accuracy. This is a very important note here. The result is a powerful, introspective, and metafictional examination of war's psychological scars. Themes of guilt, masculinity, and trauma echo through every page. The Things They Carried redefined the war narrative, offering not just a report from the battlefield, but a study of the stories we tell to survive. Okay. Finally, we arrive at one of the most ambitious and challenging novels of the era, Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace. Yes, I know. I am so sorry. However, we are only reading a short excerpt of it, and it's very, very important to understand this era of literature. Just be lucky you don't have to read the whole thing like I had to at one point. So Wallace, born in 1962, was known for his dense, digressive prose and sharp cultural critiques. He battled depression, and he did pass away in 2008, which tends to be a fact that shades much of the emotional urgency in his work. But regardless, Infinite Jest, which was published in 1986, is a sprawling dystopian satire. It's set in a near future America, which is obsessed with entertainment and numbed by addiction, whether to substances, media, or success. Let's try not to think too deeply into that, shall we? There are tennis academies, halfway houses, and even a film so entertaining it literally incapacitates viewers. I wish I was kidding. Themes include loneliness, consumerism, irony, and the desperate search for meaning in a hyper-mediated world. Wallace's work pushed literary boundaries in both form and content, to say the least. Love it or hate it, Infinite Jest has become a cult classic, absolutely. Emblematic of post modern literature, which could be another name for this era, but let's just stick with contemporary, shall we? All right, so let's bring these voices together. What unites them? Trauma and memory are central, from Morris's haunted past to O'Brien's unreliable recollections. Marginalized identity surfaces in both Morrison and Cisneros, challenging dominant cultural narratives. Addiction and existential malaise are explored by Wallace and O'Brien, pointing to emotional voids of late capitalism and war. Nonlinear storytelling and metafiction thread through both Wallace, Morrison, and O'Brien, who each play with time, truth, and perception. Each writer innovates in form and voice, and crucially, voices once considered fringe, such as Black, Latinx, war scarred, mentally ill, etc., are now central to the American literary conversation in this era. So let me leave you with 5 key ideas, if you'll allow me. Literature as historical witness. Each of these works respond to a specific socio-political trauma, such as slavery, war, immigration, addiction, or systematic oppression. Expanding the canon. This era reflects a deliberate effort, to include voices historically left out of the literary spotlight. Similarly, form mirrors content, as we've said before. These fragmented narratives echo fragmented lives, identities, and histories. There's a multiplicity of truth. These authors challenge the idea of a single truth. Instead, they offer layered, subjective, and emotionally complex realities. And lastly, empathy through storytelling. This is new. This is big. Uh, Overall, these works, however complex or experimental, seek to connect. They ask us to see and feel the lives of others over all else. Okay, we did it. Great. So, if you have any questions, as always, reach out. Office hours, course chat. You should know the drill by now. And I hope you enjoy the reading this week. Yeah, happy reading, happy writing. Have a good week. Bye.